Crafty. Can you hear me? Okay. We good to go?
You're on.
Oh, we're live. Well, so we stormed the Capitol. Donald Trump got suspended permanently from Facebook and Twitter. And Nancy Pelosi is going to impeach Donald Trump again. I mean, a friend of mine said, if you thought 2020 was bad, wait till he grows up, gets old enough to drink, and becomes 21. Welcome to the new year. It's Rob Nelson Live. Welcome to the show, everybody. Love how we glitched into that with a little, oh, we're live. Yeah, that was completely unprepared for. It's technology in the COVID era. I am here in Jacksonville, Florida. I got a sweatshirt on today. It is cold. It is butt cold. I'm freezing my balls out here, guys, because I'm going to do this show no matter what. 40 degrees. I know it's not that cold if you're living in the north, but hey, down here, it's cold weather. And it is a weird, weird time. So thanks for watching the show. Everybody out there, we're streaming on all social platforms. Love all the interaction. We get so much interaction from YouTube and from Facebook and from Instagram, a lot from Reddit. Love it. Love your comments, your feedback, and love the engagement. So let's dive right in because a lot's happened. Woo! I mean, it's only 2 days and it feels like a whole year's of activities gone by. Did Trump incite violence? Good. Common sense. We'll bring as much common sense as we can to this whole thing. Impeach him again. We're gonna get to that.
That's funny. Arm. That's funny.
We're gonna get to that monkey arms. We're gonna get to impeaching Trump again. It's gonna come a little bit later. Let's start with what happened. Okay, there's a lot to cover today. I want to start out with this. You know, everybody's saying Trump incited violence. We all know what happened, right? We all know there's a massive protest, you know, how many, tens and tens of thousands of people. And then they climb up in the things and climb inside the windows, bust in, get into the Capitol. All hell breaks loose. Madness, insurrection, rioting, chaos. And all after Trump gave a speech. Did Trump incite violence? And I want to address this because I think it's a serious thing. And I'm not dismissing, and I'm not defending Trump here, okay? I mean, look, Trump had it coming, right? I've said for a long, long time, Trump misrepresents stuff to people, and he led people on. He said since this election ended, which it did really in my mind, it ended when Biden got elected, 2 months ago. And despite the claims of fraud, which were legitimate, people had every right to protest, complain, examine. But Trump knew he lost, or he didn't know he lost because he's a total sociopath. But either way, Trump lost the election and kept driving this thing that it was stolen. I'm not going to deep dive into this because I've done it before. But as I said, what clearly, if you want to know the quick 30-second take, I've said it before. They knew when they did mail-in balloting, there was going to be lots of room for abuse. There was going to be lots of room without adequate safeguards. They knew that. They did it. Is that fraud? Is it legit fraud? I mean, they didn't challenge it in the courts till after the fact. So, Dems got away with it. And politics is dirty. But it wasn't stolen in the way Trump liked to say, as if people were just stuffing ballot boxes everywhere and computers were being hacked and the whole thing. And he led people to believe that. And I don't think it was right. I don't think it was good. I don't think that's a good thing to do. I don't think it was fair to his followers and supporters because they're already feeling cheated, But that said, did what he say in that speech incite violence? I mean, he didn't say go storm the Capitol. He really didn't. And do you think Trump really wanted them to storm the Capitol? I mean, let's be honest. Trump's kind of a law and order type guy, right? Like all about we don't have violence. But I know some of you are going to argue, no, he knew exactly what he was doing. I don't know what Trump really knew. You don't know what Trump really knew. I know what he said. And you know what he said wasn't go storm the Capitol and get violent. He said, let's protest this thing. But now what people are going to say is it's in the subtext. And I agree. Subtext is everything. What you say isn't always literally what you say. I mean, Shakespeare, Julius Caesar, one of the most famous lines of all time, in that regard, right? Is Mark Antony saying, I come not to bury Caesar, but to praise Caesar. You know, he keeps saying, I come not to bury Caesar, but to praise Caesar. And the whole time he's burying Caesar. He's setting him up to kill Caesar. But he keeps saying, you know, I'm not saying I want to kill Caesar. I'm saying the opposite. But he clearly wants to kill Caesar. So you could argue, you could still, I'm not wrong on mail-in ballots, Cruzen. Never been wrong on mail-in ballots. Mail-in ballots lead to fraud. Where I am right is also, again, they should have challenged that before. Had they challenged that before, they could have had a valid argument to say that the Constitution only lets state legislatures make voting laws. You can't do it through the courts. You can't do it through governors. And they could have challenged that. And had they challenged it before the election with a conservative kind of original jurisprudence type Supreme Court, they probably would have won. But they challenged it after the election, which is way too late. You're not going to overturn millions of voters who voted in good faith on those laws, and they shouldn't have overturned it. Any more just sidebarring than Pence should have gone in and tried to upheave the election. Which part of conservatives, you know, I mean, again, the irony of all this is conservatives are supposed to like states' rights, right? The whole idea, anybody who thinks that the founding fathers thought that that the vice president, an executive elected official, should have the power to overturn an election when he opens the ballots, you're smoking crack. There's no way they intended that to happen. They wanted power in the states. The state legislatures could overturn the electors. We didn't see that happen. No way in any conservative landscape did the founders think that Mike Pence or a vice president should have the power to flip the switch and turn it off and turn it over and switch the outcome. Wasn't going to happen, shouldn't have happened. Right outcome happened. Despite what I think about mail-in balloting, we got a constitutionally legitimate outcome. Joe Biden's president. People need to accept that, move on, done. But did Trump incite the riots? That's the question I'm going on here. Did Trump trigger rioting? His subtext winds people up. Excuse me for coughing. It's freezing out here, guys. But it winds people up. But does that mean he incited the riots? I mean, he said, everybody go home. Go home peacefully now. Go home. But I was cheated out of the election. And people are going to argue because he said he was cheated. The subtext was don't go home. I don't know that I agree with that. I don't know that the subtext was don't go home. But here's why I'm going to go with this right now. He didn't tell him to storm the Capitol, Cruzen. He did not say go storm the Capitol. He said march to the Capitol. You have every right to march to the Capitol. We'll get to why they weren't more prepared for thousands of people marching to the Capitol in a little bit. But here's why I'm going to make a comparison. I know some of you are going to call it a false equivalency, but it's not to BLM, because I'm not saying what they did in Washington was the same as what the protesters did around BLM, or even that they were the same value of a cause. You could argue, you know, racial oppression. You could argue both sides, but you could easily argue racial oppression was a much more important thing than, say, claiming an election was stolen when it really wasn't. But either way, I'm not talking about the value or the merits of what they protested. I'm talking about the idea of what incites violence or encourages violence. Crafty, I want to play something. I agree with you, Monkey Arms. His speech doesn't happen in a vacuum. I 100% agree with that. But I want you all to watch this little collection of clips. This is during the BLM protests. And this is everyone from news anchors to Kamala Harris talking about what's going on. It's about 30 seconds during protests / riots around BLM. Crafty, can we play that video clip?
That ain't a riot, what we're seeing right now in Minneapolis. What we're seeing right there is frustration.
Do not get it twisted and think that, oh, this is something that has never happened before, and then this is so terrible.
Shouldn't that be done by a commission or the city council, not a mob in the middle of the night throwing it into the harbor?
People will do what they do.
There's violence across the whole country. Do you disavow the violence from Antifa?
That's a myth.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
They're not going to let up, and they should not.
This is mostly a protest. It is not, generally speaking, unruly, but fires have been started.
I mean, I show that, and before you go and make excuses for it, just look at what it is. Kamala Harris is saying they're not going to let up, they shouldn't. Chris Cuomo saying protests aren't supposed to be peaceful. You got fires burning, and, you know, MSNBC guy is going, it's mostly peaceful. You got him, Nancy Pelosi saying people will do what they do. Did Kamala Harris incite violence? Because the BLM riots were violent. There was a lot of violence. There were a lot of peaceful protesters, but there was way more violence that happened in the BLM riots. I mean, the staggering difference, guys, and we'll come back to the speech thing, but I want to emphasize, because our reaction to what's happening, the damage from BLM was so much more than the damage from this, and yet the reaction so much less. Now, you can argue that the reaction was different because of the cause, but that's not my point. My point has to do with the cause. I agree. Trump has many platforms. We're going to talk about that, because I think what's happening on social platforms should be scary to people on the left as much as on the right. We're going to get to that like halfway through the show. But let me just run through some stuff, because I want you guys, again, I'm not taking the side of the right here. I'm not defending Trump. I want to be clear about that. Whether or not Trump's a sociopathic, narcissistic, and in some ways an idiot, because he just stabbed a knife through his own end of his presidency. And I think he's going, oops, went too far. And a lot of you are going, yeah, well, finally. And again, we'll talk about the impact of what Trump has done. But I'm focusing on the fact that if Trump incited violence by saying march to the Capitol, then all those people, all those newscasters, Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi, were inciting violence by saying people will do what they do. People should do this. People should go out. Now, why is that not okay? Because I want to look at people weren't lied to. People are always lied to. People are always lied to, you guys. Again, let's put our partisanship down. Let's put
people weren't led to.
I think you meant lied to. But let's put our partisanship away just for a minute. I'm not being partisan here. I'm trying to just kind of lay the facts out a little more objectively. This is something I think we've overlooked, the BLM violence. No, I'm not saying all Oregon elections are fraudulent. I'm not comparing the fraud. I'm not comparing the basis of what the protests were about. I'm comparing the impact of the protests. If violent protests are wrong, they're always wrong. You can't go, no, they're right when it's my cause. Because if you thought the election was stolen, and you can say Trump shouldn't have told people it was, but lots of people were saying they felt the election was stolen. And you have every right to say that. We'll get to that in a second, because 2017, same thing. But let's just look at the violence for a second, because I think we really skew over it, okay? In Minneapolis, between May and August, there was $200 million of damage to private businesses not covered by insurance. That's what insurance didn't cover. $200 million in one city in 4 months. Okay, just a couple of the violent outcomes from the riots. And I'm reading them because I can't memorize them all. Okay, Orlando, 2 federal officers shot, 1 killed. This is all in a period of like May, June, and beginning of July, like a 2-month period. Philly, rioters run over a cop and kill him. Atlanta, a cop hit by an ATV protesters, ICU. Denver, 3 cops in the hospital after they're hit by a car of protesters. St. Louis, 77-year-old ex-cop shot and killed by looters. Las Vegas, protesters shoot a cop, put him in the ICU. Seattle, a 16-year-old shot and killed, a 14-year-old shot, a 19-year-old killed, all inside CHOP, inside the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone that they created, right? Chicago, a 32-year-old shot going to pay his bill at T-Mobile by a looter. That's just a handful. That's a dozen cases of people shot, killed, hospitalized. It's not even looking at what happened in Portland, at the violence. I'll come back to it, Monkey Arms. I'm not saying it happened in a vacuum. I'm asking you to bear with me for a second and hear this out, because the protest didn't happen in a vacuum either, is my point. The protest, we've had months of protests that were legitimized. Maybe they should have been encouraged, downplayed, that there was not violence. There was massive violence. There was millions and hundreds of millions of dollars of damage done. Federal property, if that's such a big deal, was destroyed, vandalized, broken. Cops were killed, put in the hospital. Innocent people were killed, put in the hospital. We had burning streets, cars, things, stores busted into everywhere. That violence was encouraged. That violence was not encouraged that they said, go be violent, although they said people do what they do. It's not really that violent. People are mad. They should let it out. Chris Cuomo, this is the most unacceptable thing ever. Protests aren't meant to be peaceful. So now you got people on the right pissed off about something. They go protest, mostly peaceful, and then a bunch of them break in the Capitol. And boom, it's a whole different thing. Now, here's the question I have for you guys, okay? Why given that the breaking in the Capitol was nowhere near what happened in BLM. Why the reaction? Why is this insurrection? Why is this so horrible? Why is this treasonous? This is the worst thing that's ever happened. Well, so I'm bad at seeing your guys' names. Soka Leon, respect democracy. Well, that could be part of it. But I think there's two things going on here. I think it's really interesting if you think about it, because if you just accept my premise that the violence and the degree of violence and the degree of damage and violence, both in terms of physical property, in terms of crime, in terms of deaths, people in the hospital, was way, way worse in the BLM marches, regardless if it was justified because of the cause. Because again, your cause versus someone else's cause. In the Capitol Hill, 5 people died. That's not okay. 1 cop, 1 person shot in the building, and 3 medical emergencies. And a lot of looting goes on. Well, not a lot. I mean, they bust in, right? Why are people so outraged? Literally outraged on all sides. You got the Republicans outraged. You got cabinet members resigning. You got the left, of course, outraged. You got Democratic politicians outraged. You got everybody outraged. Why? Well, I have a theory. One, because one is just factor in Trump hate. Trump had been building and building and building. So he's hated by the left. He's hated by the Dems. He's hated by the media. He's hated by social platforms. And truthfully, he's hated by a lot of establishment Republicans. So he's hated by a lot of people. And I'm not defending Trump. Let me be clear. Trump is a narcissistic egomaniac. It's all about him. I've said that for a while. Some of what he did, I think, was good. But most of what he sold you was a bill of goods. It was all about him. Right to the very end. And he's going to pay for that. Sort of put himself, what's that? Put yourself on your own, hoist it on your own petard or whatever. This is not about Trump. This is about why did we react so much more? Is he going to be banned too? Me? I don't know if you mean me. I don't think me. So much more than just attacking a building. Why did we react that way? Other than the Trump hate. And you guys, we did, right? And I know I'm looking at it going, okay. Well, so they busted in the Capitol. Is something wrong with me that I'm not more outraged by that? Like, they attacked democracy. They didn't attack democracy, but they were all in their meeting. Okay, they shut it down for a little bit. Now, don't get me wrong. If you were on the inside and you were the cops, you have no idea what the F's going on. I mean, it must have been like, what is happening? People are flooding in here. We don't know if they got guns. We don't know if they got bombs. We don't know if they're going to try to assassinate people. I mean, I get if you're the cops on the inside, you don't know what. I'm surprised they didn't shoot more people. Friend of mine says that's white privilege. Seriously. He's ex-cop, black cop says, no, he's still black. He's an ex-cop, says it's white privilege, because it is kind of funny if you think about it. Like, they would have not known what's going on. It's surprising they didn't shoot more people. And I'm not saying the whole thing, if black people were doing it, they would have gotten shot more, but I think they would have. Because I think it was chaos. And I think I've said before in policing, I think there's a certain amount of institutional bias and racial bias. And even black cops talk about it. So, people get more scared of black people for some reason. So I do think they would have shot more people, because I think in the end, they didn't know what was going on in there. And I don't blame the cops for not knowing what was going on. How could they know? But in reality, they didn't come in shooting things up. They came in, vandalized, sat on things, knocked some things down. Is that really treason and insurrection? Threatening our democracy? I don't think it's threatening our democracy. Ben Shapiro made the point, leaders aren't responsible for violence if they say to do it, just like Obama wasn't responsible when violence broke out in his term based on what he said. I agree that leaders aren't, and yet people are going to say subtext. People are going to say subtext. There's not. See, Monkey Arms, you go to the false equivalency, which means you're just ignoring my point. You're ignoring the facts as I see it. Bernie Sanders didn't have to tell BLM to take to the street. Kamala Harris told BLM to take to the street. She said, keep doing it. Lots of people told BLM to take to the street. So it's not a false equivalency. I showed you a few clips. Reporters just saying it's not that violent or it's not that bad is hypocritical when they're suddenly like, this is so bad. And my point, you kept seeing it happen and dismiss. Now it happened on the other side, and suddenly it's the worst thing that ever happened, even though it was way less damaging. That's my point. But you did have political leaders saying it was okay. You saw Jerry Nadler right there saying, that's Jerry Nadler, the fat guy sitting on the chair. Yeah, I'm fat shaming him, whatever. I'm not fat shaming him. Although I do have a whole thing with why you're not allowed to notice obesity, since it's the #1 killer in America and, leads to all kinds of problems around COVID and all that. But I'm not a Jerry Nadler fan, period. it just annoys me. But he's sitting there saying it's all a myth. Antifa's a myth. They encouraged people to go out. They encouraged people to do it, and they dismissed how much of it was violent. I don't know if you were at the protest, any of you out there. I was. I stood in them. I talked to people in them. And the looters weren't just random Antifa people. I talked to BLM protesters busting into stuff saying this is payback to white people. Okay, I get it. I've always argued, I get it. You make people feel pissed off long enough, they react violently. But I'm saying this was nowhere near that bad. So it's not a false equivalency to say that political leaders did encourage them to go out into the streets and downplayed the violence. But my point is, why was this so much worse? It's not just because it was on the right. Some of you on the right are going to say it's because they hate the right. It's more than that. The people on the right think this is the worst thing that ever happened. I mean, this is like 9/11, but it's not. 9/11, they bombed 3 U.S. cities. They brought down the World Trade Centers. Thousands of people died. 5 people died. And that's not okay, but it's 5 people. 15 people died in Chicago in shootings this weekend and last weekend and the weekend before that and the weekend before that. And that's Chicago. There's violence everywhere. And we just look right past it. But this is the worst thing that ever happened. And I have a theory why. Because we're tribal. And when you attack the tribe, like it or not, guys, we're all one big U.S. tribe. I know we like to be like, I'm not them. I hate them. They're not my friends anymore. They're on the right. They're on the left. I won't talk to them. But at the end of the day, when you attack something we all think of as America, we all go ballistic. 9/11 was a good example of it. You know, the Timothy McVeigh terrorist attacks, you know, years ago, the Boston Marathon bombings, you know, the pandemic, it attacked America. We rally when anything representing the country is attacked. Donald Trump, sadly for him, never got that. Never got, because he was the worst at unifying in the history of presidents. Never got that. All you have to do is when you're the president, you get the chance to bring everyone together. You don't keep dividing them. You bring them together because I ain't even going to address fuck this bullshit because I don't even know what that means unless you want to explain it. Wow. Well, you know, you can say I ride Trump's balls if that's what you want to say, which means you don't really listen because I'm not defending Trump. But I will defend, to the end of the day, the right for people to protest. And I will ask the question, why was this protest viewed so much worse than the others? And I do think a lot of it has to do with who we are as a country. And that we as a country kind of rally around us. You attacked us. I mean, if you guys think about it, really, was attacking the Capitol, really? Was busting in the Capitol really that horrible a thing? I mean, I'm not being facetious. I'm not saying it's okay. It's not okay. And it should be condemned and they should be arrested. But I mean, honestly, if Trump had been president and a bunch of, you know, liberals had protested and busted in the Capitol, would we say it's an insurrection? Sure, it's not okay. It's not. Violence isn't okay. Political violence isn't okay. Although, ironically, everyone condemns political violence, and yet political violence is how most change has happened. I mean, don't want to remind you, but, you know, that's how our country started, political violence against something we felt was oppressing us, you know? And yes, there have been movements of peaceful change, but most social change has had violence attached to it. Sad, but that's sometimes how people listen. Not defending the violence on the right around this stuff. Not defending the violence on the left around BLM stuff either. I'm just saying everyone acts like, oh my God, you know, we're a violent country. Again, go look at the inner cities. Go in the inner cities. Go look at the level of violence Chicago has every weekend. You want to see violence? And that's economically triggered violence. That's violence we could end by investing time and energy in building those communities. But we don't. We focus on this big battle between left and right, left and right. That's why I'm not actually riding Trump's balls. I actually don't like Trump. I don't like the Republicans. I don't like either political party. I think both political parties are bankrupt and corrupt and don't give a crap about America and the people. They care about staying in power. And I say that as somebody who's been around it, who worked around it, you know, who's one of the original political activists of my generation and Generation X. I have always found both parties to be suspect. But I also think it's interesting. I don't know if this dude's wild is good or bad, that we're so offended. And by the way, sidebar, Why weren't they more prepared for what was coming? This has led to a whole new chain of conspiracy theories. And my sister even brought one of them up. She was like, yeah, it was not a conspiracy, but she was like, how come they weren't more prepared? Did someone tell them not to stop the protesters? Don't fall for that, guys. Nobody told them not to stop the protesters. First of all, it's not like the Capitol Police would have listened if they were told don't stop the protesters. Like, they were busting into the Capitol. They didn't know. They legitimately didn't know if those people were going to come in and what they were going to do. So nobody told them not to do it. But why were they so unprepared? How could they not have expected the possibility of this happening? And I think there's two reasons for it. One, the obvious answer sometimes is the right answer. They really just weren't prepared. They just weren't prepared. Pattern plans, no. It is a false equivalency. Well, that may be a comment from earlier. I don't think it's a false equivalency to compare. I'm a sidebar for my own sidebar. Why do you guys keep using false equivalency? That's become one of our things, like the science. It's a false equivalency whenever anybody says something you don't like that compares two things that are the same. False equivalencies are two things that are falsely equivalent. To compare two protests, two waves of protest, when I expressly say I'm not comparing the basis of those protests, I'm merely comparing what happened in those protests and the consequence of those protests. It's not a false equivalency. It'd be a false equivalency if I said the BLM protests weren't as important. To say the BLM protest caused X amount of damage, caused X amount of death, and this protest caused this amount of damage and this amount of death, and one is way greater, is not a false equivalency. It's two protests, two movements, and one had a greater physical impact than the other, and one got downplayed, which I showed you, and you can see tons of other clips, and the other got way overplayed. It's not a false equivalency. It's a fair comparison. So, why were they not better prepared? One argument, and I think it is a really good one, the same friend, my ex-cop friend, made the point. He's like, because they didn't think white people were going to storm the Capitol. Might be right. The other is that area where they go up there, right? You can't go up there. You haven't been able to go up there for years, up the steps. And it's like nobody ever bothered to barricade the windows and thinking no one would ever go up there, you know? But the third reason is that I think one of the arguments I've heard that's really interesting is that half of our security is political and psychological. Monkey arms. That interestingly enough, monkey arms is a false equivalency, because you're now saying, am I comparing a CVS to breaking into the Capitol? I'm not, but you're picking one CVS. They broke into the U.S. Capitol. They caused X amount of damage and X amount of death. During the BLM protest, hundreds of millions of dollars of damage were done to hundreds and thousands of businesses, not one CVS. Federal buildings were attacked. Things were lit on fire. Dozens of people were killed. Cops were killed, run over. Innocent people were shot and killed. That is what I'm comparing it to. That compared to breaking into the Capitol, which again, my point, why suddenly is everybody like, it's the Capitol? I mean, it is the Capitol, yes, and I get it. No one's ever done it since the British in 1812. But at the end of the day, it's like we get so hyper wound up. I mean, I'm not saying it's okay, but it's not 9/11. It's just not. 9/11, we were attacked. Buildings fell. Thousands of Americans died. This was not 9/11. Let's not treat it like 9/11. You can hate Trump. You can say he triggered it. You can arrest the people and put them in jail who did it. Wasn't the end of the world. They went back in a couple hours later and finished certifying Joe Biden as they should have done. Everything worked out fine. It's like sometimes we just get so hyper overreactive. But the reason, back to the security, is something that I think is really interesting. You know, Sandy Berger was Clinton's National Security Council advisor, National Security advisor. And he said something interesting to me a number of years ago. He said, we're talking about security after 9/11 at the airports and how so much of it seems like what's the point? You know, they check the bottle and this and that and every little thing. And then people sneak tests, FBI does tests and they sneak things through, like they get guns through. And he said it's Potemkin security. Potemkin security. Potemkin comes from the idea of Potemkin village. It's like a village made to look really nice when what's behind it is bad. Potemkin's like a false appearance. And I think we have Potemkin security in a lot of ways. We think we're safer than we are. They tell you we got it covered, we got it handled. In reality, they're not ready for half the shit that happens. I think some of it's that. They just weren't ever expecting this to happen, and they make it seem like they got everything sealed and secured, and they didn't. They have windows you could bust right in, been there dirtied up for the last 15 years. Nobody been up by them, never cleaned them. Nobody walks up there. They're just never as secure as we think. We walk around being told we're secure all the time, and they have to do that to make us feel safe. If they told you, hey, half the stuff we're doing when we're running through airport security is just to make you feel better, because at the end of the day, we know the FBI can smuggle a bomb through. That could scare you. That's fair, Cruz, and it will remain to be seen if it all works out fine. But I really think it will, and I think you know this. You know, I mean, I think a few of you guys, you know, you like to throw shade on me, and that's fine. But I think at some level, right? I mean, you know that breaking in the Capitol isn't okay. It's not all right. It's not excusable. People should pay. They should be punished. They should go to jail. But it's not 9/11. Cruz, and you lived in New York. You know it's not. You do not. It's not 9/11. This is not 9/11. We're acting like it is. To the issue of Trump and what he said, right? You know, the whole issue that Trump, and I want to get to this because I want to focus this on the censorship stuff. You know, Trump's being charged with basically saying the election was a fraud. And that's what he's getting. That's why he's been shut down on Twitter and Facebook. That's why people are arguing that he should never have said, yeah, I agree. It only happened one other time by another country. I get it. 1812, the British. They actually went in and burned the Capitol to the ground. And maybe that's my point, you know? I mean, protesters have been in the Capitol before, not quite at that level. They've done sit-ins and this and that. Again, I'm not trying to make it out like it's nothing, but think about why we react so dramatically to it. It's not just because it's Trump. I hope it's not. I hope you're not just reacting because it's Trump or as Republicans. I think we have a weird thing of protecting anything that we think of as America. And that may be where there's some hope in this. Because I think at the end of the day, anybody who knows me knows I'm a pretty patriotic person. I may be a libertarian socialist or a liberal libertarian, you know. I may like Bernie Sanders and still be a libertarian, but I believe in this country. And I think maybe one thing this shows me is when you attack anything that represents this country, we all kind of unify. Like I said, that's where Trump never got it. Never got that. He could have, even around the pandemic, seen it as an attack. We're being attacked by a force we can't control. Let's unite. Instead, he dismissed it. It was like, go away. Don't mess my economic recovery up. I'm not defending Donald Trump. He got what he had coming to him. He was an egomaniac. He was maniacal. He was sociopathic. He was all about himself. And at the end of the day, kind of got what he had coming to him. But when he said the election was stolen and everybody went crazy, I just want to run through something real quick with you guys, because this is 2019. And again, this one you can't say is a false equivalency, since I'm going to tell you what people said after Donald Trump was elected president. Like who? Well, how about the person who lost to him? Hillary Clinton. 2019 on CBS News, Hillary says he knows he's an illegitimate president. She goes on to talk about all kinds of tactics, from voter suppression to hacking to false stories to vote purging. And if that hadn't happened, she says, the election would have turned out different than it did. She then goes on to compare herself to someone who got 67, a job applicant who got 66 million positive recommendations and loses to a corrupt human tornado. I love that she called him a corrupt human tornado. It's actually a great description of Donald Trump. I knew this wasn't on the level, she says. This is a quote. Don't know if we'll ever know what really happened. Sounds a little like Donald Trump. Jimmy Carter, June 2019. Trump lost the 2016 election and was put in office by the Russians. Trump didn't actually win the election in 2016. That's Jimmy Carter. You have a former U.S. president saying Trump was put in office by the Russians. He didn't actually win the election. You have the former Secretary of State who lost the election to him saying he's an illegitimate president. The election was stolen. We'll never know what really happened. Sound a little like Donald Trump? How come that just because Trump connected with more people when he said it, they said the same thing? You know, Tom Coleman, former congressman from Missouri, said Pence is an illegitimate vice president. Trump's an illegitimate president. And Pence is the chief enabler of this illegitimate president. John Lewis, well-known, civil rights activist, Democratic congressman. Trump is an illegitimate president. And he and tons of Democrats didn't attend the inauguration because of it. 68% of Democrats in 2017 thought Trump was not legitimately elected. So when you say Trump shouldn't say the election was a fraud, why not? I mean, I'm not saying it was, but people were saying his election was a fraud for years. That's not a false equivalency. That's a direct comparison, you know? Yeah, I get it. I get it, Monkey. I get it, Monkey Arms. The left is sick of the lying. I get it. I'm not saying Donald Trump was not a liar. He was. But what I'm asking you to see in what I'm laying out is that people on the right of center, now I'm not going to say the far right, right of center, feel they're sick of what they see as lies coming from the left. And whether you think it's true or not, around the Russian stuff, the Russian, Trump wasn't put in office by the Russians. They knew that, The Democratic leaders knew what they were doing. They were using a political tool to get him. So people feel there was a lot of lying on the other side too. So I get you're sick of the lying. I get it. I am too. I don't think we're going to be worse off not having Donald Trump, but suddenly you think you're going to be getting told the truth? Like they were all telling you the truth before? That's just why I don't get it. I agree. I don't think we should be comparing this to 9/11. I don't even think we should be calling this like an insurrection. It wasn't an insurrection. It was a protest gone awry and they busted in the Capitol. Can we call it for what it is? Not okay. Shouldn't have happened. People should be punished. They busted in the Capitol, climbed through the window, sat on chairs, broke things. That's not insurrection. People say they were trying to stop them from voting. Okay, they didn't. They didn't stop them from voting. Well, they temporarily did. And again, on the inside, it was much more scary. But what we now know really happened, I'm saying. I agree, hypocrisy on all sides. And I think that's my point, that there's hypocrisy on all sides of this. I mean, look, you want to talk about hypocrisy, guys? Nancy Pelosi is going to impeach Trump again. And she wants them to use the 25th Amendment. So if you think I'm being cynical here, consider this. How much you know about the 25th Amendment? Do you think Nancy Pelosi knows as much as I do about the 25th Amendment? Because I bet she does. I bet she probably knows even more about 25th Amendment than I do. She's certainly better. She's been in office for 100 years. The 25th Amendment does not happen when the vice president and half the cabinet vote to get rid of the president and the president just goes away. The vice president and a majority of the cabinet have to vote to remove the president from office. Once they do that, the president can object, at which point there's a several-day waiting period during which they respond. So we're already up to he's got 5 days left in office. At that point, it goes to the House and the Senate, where you need a 2/3 vote. So you need 67 senators to vote to remove him from office, and you need almost 400 members of Congress. Not going to get it. Nancy Pelosi, in her wildest dreams, knows she doesn't have the votes to get that many Republicans to vote to remove the president on the 25th Amendment, or that many senators. She knows it, and yet she acts like it could happen. That's political hypocrisy. She knows it. She's just baiting you on the same way. She knows they're not going to remove him of the 25th Amendment. Calling on Pence to do it is a joke. She knows it won't happen even if he did do it. She knows they'd never get it through Congress. She knows it has to go through Congress. She knows Trump can oppose it, and there's a 2-3 day waiting period during which they have to rebut to it. And she knows that, just as she knows the impeachment's not going to go through on the Senate side. And she's got a better shot with that one. But even that, impeaching him, it's just like we're going to get him again. Like Freddy Krueger. I get it. You want him to pay. People want Trump to pay. I get it. I get people want Trump to pay. And Monkey Arms, you guys, I get your hatred of Trump. Go for it. Trump's going to pay. Trump's paying right now. And I know you're so happy to get him out. But I've used the example before of Nelson Mandela, who got treated way worse than any of you have ever been treated. 35 plus years in prison for doing what? Wanting independence and a voice for Black people in South Africa. And after 35 years, he gets out and he becomes president. And the last thing he did was encourage violence. The last thing he did was encourage divisiveness. I've said before, he brought two of his jailers onto the dais with him when he was actually inaugurated as president to say, it's time we move on. So you can hate Trump all you want, But if you really are about moving on isn't just say calls for unity. Let's all come together now and be happy, go lucky. It's actually extending an olive branch. You guys are the winners on the left. The Dems won. It's actually up to you to extend the olive branch because you're the victors. It doesn't work the other way. After World War I, we crushed Germany. We were like, you're done. And we made them pay. You lost us in the war, and we're going to make you pay. And look what that created. It created Hitler in World War II because Hitler was driven by an economic movement to get power back to the Germans because they were crushed. That's why they did the Marshall Plan after World War II. New strategy. We defeat these guys. Let's rebuild their countries. You got the winning. You're the winners. You got to extend the olive branch. That's how it works. So to the real issue for me is the suspension of Trump on Twitter and Facebook. This is where I think this all comes down. The actress, Emily, can we pop her tweet up? Monkey Arms. Monkey Arms doesn't hate Trump. Okay, I would think you would. And I
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. He doesn't.
No,
he's
Monkey
never
Arms
said one positive thing about Trump ever.
Monkey Arms, if you hate Trump, Crafty doesn't even buy it. I might believe you. You're going to have to convince me because I would think you would. So tell me why.
Hours of evidence that he's not said one positive thing.
Tell me why you don't hate Trump, Monkey Arms. Crafty, let's put that Emily. I can't say her last name. Emily Ratajkowski. I always say it wrong. The actress gives Facebook tech Zuck the most power. If he can shut the president up, he can shut any of us off. Now, here's the thing. Emily Ratajkowski is not a conservative. She's a hardcore liberal. In fact, the reason she's scared is the second part of her tweet, which is basically, we have that too, right? My concern is that this gives big tech the opportunity to shut down leftist extremists who are important political organizers. Emily's figured out what I've been saying for a while, which is, guys, this is, okay, let's lose the tweet. Crafty blocking me. Crafty shading me. This is the problem. If Zuckerberg and Facebook and Twitter can just silence the president, no matter how much you don't like what he's saying, it's scary for all of us. I want to just run through real quickly what Zuckerberg and Facebook and then what Dorsey and Twitter did. Let's just pop up Crafty quickly Zuckerberg's thing. So it gives you a check and a look. So Zuckerberg goes through and says the shocking events, demonstrate that Trump intends to use his remaining time in office to undermine the peaceful transition of power, and his platform to use that to condone these actions of what happened at the Capitol means that we are permanently suspending his thing. And then the second half, I'm obviously massively paraphrasing for time, is that they've allowed Trump to use his platform within our own rules. And they've given him room to do that, they say, and when he violates the policy, it's done. But they now say, and this is the important part, we believe the risks of allowing the president to continue to use our service during this period are simply too great. Therefore, we're extending the block to make it permanent. So the problem I have with that is not whether or not, again, I'm not getting into whether Twitter and Facebook have a right to do this. They're saying, we don't think what Trump is saying and the way he's saying it, it's too dangerous to America. Let's look at what Twitter did. Twitter's is even more, they did a blog, is even more to the point. They don't even hesitate to say what it is. Captain Red Hawk. Yes, the Dems called Trump illegitimate and said the Russians helped him. The difference is none of them called for an armed takeover to unseat him. Basically, Trump did. And that's why I disagree. Trump didn't call for an armed takeover to unseat him. You're inferring that Trump wanted an armed takeover. And I don't know if he did or didn't. But you got to show me the quote where Trump said, hey, guys, let's form an armed insurrection and storm the Capitol and take over. He never actually even said anything close to that. And that's my point. You're inferring what he meant. And whether he meant it or not, I don't know. Maybe he did mean that. Maybe that is secretly what he wanted. It's possible. I'm not saying it's not, but he didn't say that. And this is my problem with the censorship. Crafty, put the Dorsey tweet, the blog up from Dorsey and Twitter. So they're suspending real Donald Trump. And I can barely read this, so you're going to have to read it yourself, you guys. But basically, they've decided that's just the first page. So the second page, I'll paraphrase what it says. The second and third pages of this show Donald Trump's tweets. So this is what Trump tweeted. So this, you guys, this is what he actually said and why he's suspended. 75 million American patriots who voted for me, America first, and made America great again will have a giant voice going into the future. They will not be disrespected or treated unfairly in any way, shape, or form. And then he says, shortly after, anyone who said I'm going to about the inauguration, I'm not going. So that's what Trump said. Put that back for a second, Crafty. That's what Trump said. Now the other one. That's what Trump said. He said the 75 million people who have a giant voice going into the future. And from this, and I won't go to the inauguration. And from this, Twitter concluded the following. They concluded that their assessment is that what he intends to do with what he means by that could lead to violence, that it could. And that is what's scary. They're saying it's highly likely that these words could potentially be heard by some to mobilize them to do something. Guys, that's what's scary to me. That's what's really frightening, you know? Thanks, Crafty. You can pull it down. Thanks, man. That's what's really frightening to me. Okay? This is what I want you to think about. What Trump said was the 75 million people who voted for me and MAGA and America First are going to have a strong voice long into the future. And by the way, I'm not going to go to the inauguration, if you were wondering. That's a second tweet. From that, Twitter decides not that what he said literally was calling for violence, but that it could be read by some that you're going to have a great voice going into the future. How is going to have a great voice going into the future likely to be read by some to be, let's start armed insurrection and be violent? And their reason for suspending him is that it will incite violence. It's a public safety argument. Guys, that should friggin' terrify you. You're going to argue. You may think Trump does want that. I don't know what Trump wants, and truthfully, you don't know what Trump wants either. But you know what he said. And if you could infer that somebody's saying we're going to have a great voice going into the future, well, then I'm going to infer that Kamala Harris saying they should be out there doing this and there'll be more of it is inciting people to go out and riot and be violent. No, she wasn't saying that, but you could easily infer that. Easily. Just as easily, more easily than you could infer Trump saying that we're going to have a great voice going into the future. Then how is that inciting violence? Because some people could see it as subtext to go out and revolt. Well, sure, people could see all kinds of things as subtext to go out and revolt. But are you going to suspend the president of the United States platform to say that? That's what's scary to me. Emily Ratajkowicz, I'm sorry, I mispronounced her name. I'm never going to get it right, you know, is a lefty, hardcore. And she's seeing that this comes around. She's scared that this could come back and get the left. Just because right now it's not, doesn't mean it won't. If you're going to just decide, if Facebook is that powerful that they can just like that silence the president of the United States, take his account down, Twitter, done. He didn't say go out and start shooting people. He said you're going to have a great voice going into the future. They both inferred his words and his refusal to go to the inauguration. Well, the Dems didn't go to the inauguration of Trump. Tons of them. So should they have their platform suspended? Again, does he get his suspended simply because he reaches more people? He's more effective at it? Because you have every right to not. I mean, I think he should go. I think he should. But he doesn't have to. He can be pissed. You can be, it's petty, whatever. The Constitution's going to work fine. Biden's going to be president, whether Trump's at the inauguration or not. Our Constitution's actually working just great. That's the irony. I said this during the whole Trump thing when people were like, he's going to destroy the Republic. It was like, no, he's not. And people will probably vote him out of office in 4 years if they want to, and they did. Our Constitution's held up fine. And one group of rioters charging into the Capitol doesn't change that one little bit. Not even a little bit. I know his tweet didn't happen in a vacuum, monkey arms, and I don't think anything happens in a vacuum. But my point isn't whether or not it happens in a vacuum. My point is, if you want social media platforms to deciding the context of everything that happens, the context of whatever comments are made, we are now going to be the editorial board to decide whether the context of what you said, based on how we interpret, how it could be interpreted, what we think it might mean to some people, based on our interpretation of what that tweet might mean to some people who might choose to do something with it, we're going to suspend your account. Maybe you're fine with that for Donald Trump because you hate what he's saying, but you should be scared as crap of what that means that they have this much power. The real power in the United States, the ultimate most powerful force in the United States is Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey. They really should get the medal for the two most powerful people perhaps in the world, because they have shown that they can shut the information valve off. And if you shut that valve off, you can argue Trump has other outlets. If you shut that valve off when we all are relying on it, it's like turning the power off. It's like cutting, it's like cutting transportation. It's like cutting the phone lines. If the telecommunications companies could have just decided we're going to cut the phone lines to New York City, people could be like, well, there's other ways to cut people. Write them a letter. That's why they ultimately nationalized and broke up the telecoms, because it was like, you have too much power. But what if they just said, we're shutting off the city? We don't like you. We're cutting your phone lines off. We don't like you. We're cutting your phone lines off. Well, you could use other means. You could send a fax. Well, you'd have to find a way around the phone line. Point is, when you have that much control over the flow of information and you can shut people off, it's frighteningly scary. Yeah, we can hear you. I think I'm lovely. What are you saying? Just think I'm lovely. Have another comment. We can hear you. It's just sometimes hard for me to keep up with all the comments because there's so many of them. A totality of the circumstances led to this outcome. You may not see or agree with that, but that's the reality. I don't disagree with that. I'm not stupid. I mean, I get it. I get that a totality of circumstances led to it. And that's inevitably true in life in general, right? I don't think this is an isolated act. And I'm not, again, I want to be clear. I'm not defending Donald Trump, you guys. He set himself up for what happened. He pissed everybody off. He went after everybody. He lied. He said stupid things. He inflamed people. He divided people. He went after social media platforms. He went after left, right. He pissed everyone off. And people were just waiting to get him. I don't feel sorry for him. That's not my point. My point is that the totality of the circumstances you can argue leads to an outcome, sure, but that outcome is a scary one. That outcome is a scary one when a social media platform is stepping in and saying, Trump still has millions of followers. This is the part I think you guys are leaving out. Half the country voted for him. That's not literally half the country. We're one country, and this is where maybe I want to take this, We're one country. I keep coming back to this because I'm the guy who's going to be Mr. Rogers and try to say we got to find a middle ground, a common ground, because we die if we don't. They attacked the Capitol. You all got outraged on the left and the right. That's actually a good thing, even though I think the outrage might have been a little high. I get it because they attacked the Capitol. They attacked something that's all of ours. Well, we're all in it together. So you may hate Trump, but if you're going to silence the president of the United States because his words saying you're going to have a voice going forward could be seen as inciting violence when half the country voted for him, you're ignoring the fact that millions of people, not people who are smoking weed, crack, not weed. Weed doesn't make you do that. And not even smoking crack. But I'm saying not people who are just like drinking Kool-Aid are who you think just bought into the craziest of the conspiracy of the fraud. I'm talking millions of people who voted for Trump because they liked what he stood for, and who feel their voices have been pushed down and feel there is an unfair bias in the media and in social platforms towards conservative voices. Those people, they're not fanatics. Those people now feel that just because the president says we're going to have a voice going forward, you're going to silence them. And you can say it's the totality of the actions, but that action alone says an enormous amount about the willingness to censor a viewpoint you don't agree with. Because Facebook and Twitter aren't going to do that on the other side. Again, totality of the actions isn't the point. The action itself that came out of it is, and it's a scary one. It's one that can hurt all of us on the left and on the right. Yeah, I agree with you, Cruson, but or Monkey, that was Cruson, right? I agree with you that no broadcaster just lets anyone on, but Twitter is not treated like a broadcaster and Facebook, and they became social platforms, and the president isn't just anyone. And again, if you're going to argue that it makes sense to censor the president's account like that, again, it is only a matter of time. Look at history before it will come back and get you. Emily's right. that see, I didn't even try and say her last name this time, that it will eventually get people on the left. It will get any voice that whoever's in control decides they want to stop or censor. That really is terrifying. And it affects every single one of us. Am I the guy talking? Yes, I am, lovely. I don't know if that was meant to be a joke. I'm a little slow on some of these comments. What was Monkey Arm saying? Let me see that. Yeah, I agree with you, Monkey Arms. Again, I'm not defending Trump, but if you guys don't get it, I'll say it a different way. Well, I'll say it the same way. You guys won. It's up to you to extend the olive branch. Forget about Trump. Trump's amazing power is that he's managed to keep the focus on him right to the end, right to the very end. Nobody talks about Joe Biden. It's just all about Trump. Trump's kept the lens on him, the focus on him from the minute he walked down that elevator to the minute he leaves the White House in whatever way, shape, or form he leaves it. He's won, you guys. He's pulled one over on you. Stop focusing on Donald Trump. Focus on what we have to do going forward. And the people who supported policies Trump supported, if you are going to dismiss 75 million people in this country who voted for him, you're in trouble. And by the way, what's coming down the pike, I've said before, if we stick in this thing of they're all wrong and I'm all right, and the other side, they're all wrong and I'm all right, we are going to hit the biggest cultural, political civil war we've ever seen. And I don't know how violent it'll be or violent it won't be, but it'll be ugly because you can't just censor half the country that you don't agree with. And that's ultimately my point. Yeah, the president has lots of options. I thought about that. I don't know if he will. I thought, will he just try to use Don Jr.'s account? But then they'll silence Don Jr.'s account. And that's my point. They can keep silencing you. The thing that should scare you all is the silencing. And you can justify it and say it's a totality of actions and say he asked for it. I don't care about Donald Trump. I care about the fact that Twitter and Facebook believe they have the right to take the president of the United States account down permanently because they think something he said about great, you're going to have a voice going forward, might be, their own words, might be mobilized by some as a call to violence. Anything could be mobilized by someone who wants to as a call to violence. And if you're going to let them have that power, not just editorially, mark what words you can say, but mark what those words might mean if taken in a certain context. It's like Simon & Schuster, taking Senator Hawley's book out of publication because he voted to object to the election. He had every right to vote to object to the election. Barbara Boxer objected to the election in 2005. She voted against certification. Numerous Democrats did it in 2017. They did it in 2001 after Gore. It's been done. It's a legal right you have. If we're going to say using your legal rights, using your voice, using these platforms to make a point we don't agree with, we're going to censor you for that, we are just all in trouble. Yeah, and I would agree with this comment and kind of take it out here. The fringe and the left and right are dangerous. And I think the middle on both sides, you say, are really unaffected by this, but I would argue are affected by it because I think the middle is who's paying the price. And maybe that's why I really want to take all this, you guys. At the end of the day, I'm not trying to make the case for the right or the left or against the left or against the right. I'm not trying to defend Donald Trump. I want a populist, progressive president. That's not Joe Biden, but I see one coming down the pike. I see a populist progressive president who actually cares about the American people becoming president one day soon, hopefully in 4 years. I mean, not sooner than that. And I think that we've overlooked the real needs in this country. And that's my thing that pisses me off the most. All of this ignores the damage being done to millions of people whose lives, did we forget there was a pandemic, by the way? Did we forget? Dave Portnoy, $20 million fund that's going to fund small businesses. Why will no one in the media except Fox talk about it? Because Portnoy supported Trump. That's my point. Yes, Cruson, you're right. The media doesn't have to report or give anyone a platform. But they're going on about Beyonce coming up with like $1 million or whatever. Portnoy's raised $20 million for businesses. It's more than anybody else is doing. He'll get no media coverage because he supported Trump. That's the problem. We got serious problems. businesses, people falling through the cracks everywhere, middle-class people, poor people. We got massive and growing poverty. We have inner cities crumbling in on themselves. We have a broken education system. We have a busted up healthcare system. And all we can focus on is how bad Donald Trump is and how horrible it is that protesters marched in the Capitol. I get it. It was wrong. But let's focus on fixing the real injustices in this country, what's really broken. That, you guys, the Democrats who just took power, that's your calling right now. And I'm not convinced it's going to happen, because I swear to God, Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer are more concerned with their power than they are with anything else. Just like Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell were. They're more concerned with themselves. The day they show they're more concerned with you and me and this country is the day I'll stop criticizing them. As of now, I criticize both sides and calling all of us to start focusing on the real problems, the middle, the vast majority, 80% of this country that just want to actually find a way to work together and make this a better country. Because we could actually make America great. Not again. We could actually make it great for the first time. We could make it what it could be. It's never, ever there. It's never been what it could be, and probably never will be. But we can always be better. We can be something really amazing. We have an incredible democratic system that allows that to happen. And you all got angry that the Capitol got attacked. So I guess you all really believe and love America, which is good. So let's make America work. How about that? Make America work. Thank you guys for watching.